Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from those who leave, but from the ones who stay, only to constantly cry hurt while quietly breaking you. Welcome to Broken Truth, where love meets lies, and every story reveals the pain behind the smile. Some people betray in love not by cheating or leaving, but by playing the victim in every conflict, manipulating your empathy, rewriting the truth, and turning their faults into your blame. They wear pain like armor and innocence like camouflage, so you hesitate to hold them accountable. Why? Because every time they wrong you, they make you feel like you're the one who caused it. Their betrayal lies in emotional manipulation, pretending to be the one bleeding. While handing you the knife, he didn't leave because she screamed. He left because he finally understood why he was always whispering. It started quietly, as most undoings do not with betrayal in the way movies teach you. Not with infidelity or slammed doors, but with sighs. With stories that change depending on who is listening. With apologies that never felt complete, because somehow he always ended up saying sorry for things he didn't understand doing. She was beautiful in that fragile way that makes you feel responsible for keeping someone from shattering. The kind of person who looked wounded even when she was the one holding the knife. The first time she cried during an argument, he held her, like she might fall apart. The second time, he began to wonder if he was the one causing it. By the fifth, he no longer trusted his own voice. It wasn't that she was cruel. That's what made it harder to see. She didn't yell or threaten or call him names. She just folded into herself, made silence feel like punishment, and turned every disagreement into a tragedy where she always seemed to be bleeding. Whenever he brought up something that hurt him, she'd nod slowly and whisper, "I guess I'm just a horrible person then." And his heart would break in places that were never his to fix, so he'd take it back, the truth, his needs, his pain. He'd hug her and promise it wasn't her fault, and slowly, that became the rhythm of them, him holding the truth down with both hands so she wouldn't drown in it, or so he thought. There were moments, small ones, that felt like clarity, before guilt dimmed them, like the time he canceled dinner with his sister because she said she felt abandoned when he made plans without her, or the time he cried after losing his job and she said, "I'm sorry you're upset, but I've had a really hard day too, and I just can't carry your sadness right now." She said it gently. Everything she did was gentle. But it still cut. He learned to shrink. He learned to cushion every word in softness. Edit his honesty until it sounded like gratitude. He learned to make himself smaller so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. He called it compromise. She called it love. But it felt like walking on a floor made of eggshells while pretending it was glass, and he did love her. That was the part that haunted him. He loved her even when her version of the story erased him. He loved her even when she told her. Friends, he's just so sensitive, you know? I never know what will upset him, when in truth, he had barely spoken above a whisper in months. He loved her enough to start believing maybe he was too much, too reactive, too emotional, too easily bruised. But bruises don't lie, and his soul was covered in them. The turning point wasn't loud. It wasn't even a fight. It was a Tuesday. He had come home tired. Work had drained him. The noise of the day had clung to his skin like dust. He wanted quiet, not the kind she gave him, but the kind that came with being seen. She was on the couch, her face somber. "You forgot to text me when you got out of the meeting," she said. Her voice was soft, accusation wrapped in vulnerability. "I was worried. I thought something happened. I couldn't focus all day." He apologized. "Of course you did, but..." This time, something in his chest didn't follow. He looked at her, really looked, at the calm hurt in her eyes, at how she made concern sound like sacrifice, and for the first time, he asked himself a question he had been too afraid to whisper. Who is taking care of me in this love? He couldn't remember the last time she asked him how he felt, and stayed long enough in the answer to hold it with both hands. He couldn't remember the last time he cried without apologizing for it, or said no without earning a wounded look. He couldn't remember the last time he had space to just be, without managing someone else's sadness. She wasn't a villain, but she was used to being the victim, and in her world, someone always had to be the one at fault that night. He sat in the kitchen after she went to bed and stared at the mug of tea he never finished. The house was silent, but it felt loud. His heartbeat echoed in his hands. He remembered how, when he first met her, he admired her vulnerability, how easily she spoke about her past, her fears, her pain, how it made him feel trusted, chosen. He didn't realize back then that sometimes people reveal their scars not to connect, but to make you afraid of giving them more, and he, being the gentle one, promised he never would. So he held his feelings like weapons turned inward, just to keep the peace. But peace bought with silence isn't peace. It's surrender, and he was tired of making space only for her sadness. Tired of editing himself to fit her comfort. Tired of saying sorry for bleeding when she kept handing him the blade. He didn't leave that night. That would have been too clean. Instead, he began to notice. Every time she shifted blame, every time she turned a conversation about his needs into a discussion about her worthlessness, every time she rewrote the argument to make herself the one hurting the most, he noticed, and he didn't rush to comfort her. At first, she cried harder, played the part deeper, told him she felt like he didn't care anymore, but he just listened and didn't apologize. The silence between them changed shape. It was no longer his punishment. It became her reflection, and slowly, she noticed that the stories she told weren't working anymore, that his empathy had boundaries now, that his care had started to prioritize him too. When he finally said he needed space, she wept. "I guess I'm too broken to be loved," she whispered, and for the first time, he didn't try to fix it. He just said, "I can't keep losing myself to prove you're worth saving." That was the moment, not a scream, not an explosion, just the softest severing of a bond built on guilt. He packed gently, left a note, not of blame, but of clarity. That love is not a mirror for someone's pain to reflect endlessly. That his needs weren't attacks. That wanting to be heard doesn't make him cruel. He walked out into the early morning sky, still holding the blush of dawn. And for the first time in years, his silence didn't feel like defeat. It felt like peace. It felt like coming back. It felt like truth, finally unburdened, and truth. When it's finally spoken after being held hostage, it doesn't need to shout, it just needs to breathe. But first morning alone didn't feel like freedom. It felt like silence with too much echo. He stood by the window, a cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand, watching the world continue as if nothing had changed. And maybe, to the world, nothing had, but inside him, everything was rearranging. He didn't cry that day. He didn't smile. Either he just breathed deep, slow, unfamiliar. Sometimes, the first step toward healing isn't joy. It's absence of noise, of guilt, of needing to explain yourself every time you want something. The apartment felt too quiet, but not heavy, just still. Like the kind of quiet you get after a long storm, the kind that lets you hear yourself again. He made breakfast without checking in, played music that didn't have to be soft. He didn't need to ask if it was too much. He wore the shirt she used to call loud. He liked how it looked in the mirror. He looked in the mirror that was new. He didn't rush to fill the loneliness. Instead, he sat with it. And when the voice in his head whispered, "Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you should call her," he answered gently, "That's the exhaustion talking, not the truth, because clarity isn't just one big realization. It's 1,000 small choices to keep believing in it, especially when the past tries to rewrite itself in soft colors." So he kept choosing. He journaled, even when the words came slow. He went for walks, even when it felt pointless. He reached out to old friends, The ones he hadn't called in months because the relationship had swallowed all his space. He didn't talk about her much. He talked about himself, what he liked, what he missed, what he was learning to want again. Boundaries used to feel like walls. Now they felt like windows with locks when a friend vented without asking if he had the emotional room to hold. If he said, "Can we talk later? I'm not in the right space right now," and the world didn't collapse. When someone tried to guilt him for not replying fast enough, he didn't apologize. He just explained honestly, and then sat with the discomfort of being misunderstood without trying to fix it. He realized that love should feel like love, not like negotiation. The next time he met someone new, he didn't hide the parts of him that once got labeled as too emotional or too sensitive. He wore them like skin, not armor. He noticed things now, subtle shifts in tone, deflections, manipulations disguised as softness. But instead of panicking, he took a breath. He asked questions, he trusted his gut. Red flags no longer triggered fear, they triggered wisdom. When someone tried to play the victim over something they clearly caused, he didn't lean in with comfort, he leaned out with clarity. "I'm not here to carry blame that isn't mine," he said once, gently. "That's not love, that's control." It wasn't about being cold, it was about being warm with direction. He wasn't afraid of vulnerability anymore. He was afraid of misusing it, of giving it to people who turned it into leverage. Now he gave it slowly, authentically, and only to those who made space for his pain too. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some days were soft, some were sharp. There were nights he still missed her, not the real her, but the version he once believed in. He let himself grieve that version, but he didn't go back to find it, because he knew now, love that costs your voice isn't love. It's survival dressed up as romance. He had survived long enough. Now he was living, not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly, peacefully, finally. And maybe that's what healing really is, not the absence of pain, but the return of self, a quiet home inside your own body, a love story that starts with you. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is stop rescuing someone who keeps pretending to drown just so you forget you're the one sinking. If this story touched something real in you, don't walk away empty. Subscribe for more reflections on love and betrayal, only on Broken Truth.